instead. Big spirit in the atmosphere, take a look, see what I need. And then go about doing the best you can. That's what I did. And I can't prove that that's why everything came back to working, but it does. So when we look at their ceremonies and you start looking at what's happened, if you look at what happened to the kids in residential schools, you look at this we'll say the environment. It was supposed to have been the Holy Spirit there. This is the church. This is Jesus. This is God. This is the Virgin Mary. These sacred prayers, blessed Creator. These are all triggers because these are little kids. They're hearing those words and having those horrible things done to them. But they're not being told their own ceremonies. So when you hear people talking about their spiritual ceremonies, they say, you gotta pray. You gotta go to ceremony. No, I'm not going to ceremony. I did that 2 times. And after the second divorce, I realized I was going to the wrong ceremony. But anyway, they would always make sure that you start off on a high note. Mm-hmm. And then you end on a high note. Because when you're happy, your mind is open, and you're thankful for everything, not just this or that. Yeah. I saw a thing on television where this person was selling a book called How to Make Your Prayer More Powerful. Oh, you're going to outsmart God now. But so that's why we didn't do that. But we have to recognize that all these things are relatives. So when we go to cut down a cedar, we talk to it first. Thank you for permitting me to do this so I can transform it into something else that I need. And part of it, sometimes they put food underneath it first. But it took a long time. It took up to 7 months to take down one of those huge cedars for an ocean-going canoe. Because the first thing they do is they'd go in February and say from about head height, they'd cut around the tree and then peel all the bark off all the way down to the roots and leave it standing for 2 months. And all the sap would drain out and it gets lighter. In the meantime, they would cut poles. They about this big around, different lengths. And the way they're going to fall the tree, they would cut down small trees to make a bed. So when the tree came down, it wouldn't experience any discomfort. And before there was chainsaws and all those little saws, they would cut a notch into one side to undercut it, so when it would lean. And they cut it from the other side, and they built fire in there. So it would burn, but they had wet sand to control the burn. And when the tree started to lean, then they would put those poles there to hold it. And then they'd cut a little bit more. And then they'd start moving these poles out so that it set on the next set of them. I don't know how many they did, but then when they were ready, they knocked the poles out and it fell down without experiencing discomfort. And then that's when they'd take the bark off and they would make a blank, just the shape of what the canoe's going to look like without hollowing it out or anything. Then they would tow that to the village and work on it. But so it was a long process. There was a man we called Kanda, the hunter, James Denso. He was my uncle Claude Morrison's father-in-law. And south of Heidelberg is a place called Dunbar, and there's a low mountain up there, maybe a couple thousand feet, maybe less. But anyway, there was a big spruce up there that my uncle wanted, and he told his father-in-law about it. So I said, well, let's go get it. He said, how are we going to get it? It's up down a damn mountain. They said, first we're going to cut it down. We'll put some skids down here for it. And so when they fell that tree, it landed. The top of it was downhill this way. And then they took the limbs off it, and they took all the bark off it, but they put blocks under it so it was level. And then when they were ready, they knocked the blocks out of it so that the top end of it went down and had pries on the back end of it to get it started, and then gave it a push. And it started sliding on these skids, and it started sliding down that hill with the front end of it was very flexible. When it hit a stump or something, it would bend and go around it. And it rode all the way down that right down to the beach like that. So, you know, when you listen to the stories of how they did those things, how they put those huge posts up there to build a house, it was all letting gravity do the work. I watched my dad and his brothers help their brother-in-law move a house from Craig to Heidelberg, hold it on a raft, and then they had to take it up. It's a little bit higher than the ceiling from the beach that had to be raised up. I watched them do it. All they had was a hand winch.
We did it at Island Spirit Rising with Bo Dick when we rolled the logs out of the woods. Just did a log or a stick pathway, and it's just like one of those conveyor belts.
Yeah, that's those skids. You put those skids, because you put them on the beach too for pulling your canoes up and launching them. So what people don't understand is that our ancestors were engineers. They were brilliant. They figured out all these things. And yet we think, well, the only thing that's valid is what we learn in school. Well, here's a question for you. What's round, comes in a square container, it is eaten in the form of triangles? Pizza! You have to be able to visualize. And so that's what this whole thing is. Learn to visualize. When somebody's telling you, see if you can picture, you know, how that tree would come down, how they took all the bark off so it's really slippery, and then put those skids down there so when it starts, just the weight of it will pick up quite a bunch of speed. And even with the canoes too, when they were in big heavy seas, they didn't paddle this way. The paddle doesn't work that way, because you try this, it'll slam against the hull. So what they did is they leaned forward with their feet under the seat, and you take the paddle here, you put it in the water, and then you push. And this hand is like an oarlock, but you use your wrist. So that's why they would talk about rowing their paddles. Rowing their canoes is because they're doing this. And you're pushing your weight into it, but this way you're hurting your back because you're pulling. But this way you're using your weight. So that, even like if you look at an animal, it can feel you looking at it. But if you look through something, it can't feel it. So hunting, when you're going hunting, this hunting canoe, the paddle had a hole in the handle. So if they're sneaking up on, say, sea otter, they wouldn't look at it. But you learn to use your peripheral vision. You always watch things out here. So you might be after something over there, but you're looking over here because you see it. And it doesn't sense you looking. But when you want to check how close you are, you take that paddle and you hold it up and you look through that hole in the handle. And it can't feel you looking at it. And if you don't have that, you can do it this way. Look through. For some reason, looking through something, it can't sense you're looking at it. And then the paddle is designed for sneaking up on things. If you have a square paddle, when you lift the paddle out of the water, you can hear the water dripping off it. And animals, their hearing is very sensitive, but with this paddle that tapers to the point, when you lift the paddle out of the water runs a stream, not very much, but a stream into the water, so you don't really hear it. It's real quiet when you're paddling this way. So, and looking at even the halibut hook, the way it's made, it floats upside down. The bait's on the one side and it's got eyes to watch, and it's about a little bit more than a meter from the ocean, from the seabed. It's got an anchor to hold it, and it goes over to another anchor and then up to a buoy line. And because of the current, the thing will move. And all fish, when they go out, when they go to feed, when they swim up to get a herring or whatever, they don't just chomp on it. They go at it full speed, and then they open their mouth, and it causes a suction, and it sucks it right in. Halibut is this way, and its mouth is much bigger. And I watched it. Water was about as deep as maybe 12 feet. We were anchored in a little bay and it had a sandy bottom. And I decided to try one of those hooks because I used to fish with them. So I set one of those wooden hooks, and I sat up on top of the cabin and watched it. And see, sometimes we clean our fish, you know, when we're trolling, we throw the guts and stuff in the water, and that's the halibut would come in there. And sometimes we'd catch one with a hook, and I want to see if I catch one with one of those Haida. So I put it down there and I watched. Pretty soon I seen this dark shadow come in, and they talk about how that hook's alive. And they talk about this one boy started making fun of it. It was hanging on the wall. I hope you don't jump off the wall and grab me, something, making fun of it, and it jumped off the wall and got him. He didn't survive. But we're not supposed to tell those stories because we're not supposed to tell stories about children being injured or killed. But our stories are told that way so they know there are consequences. No, it'll come back on you. But anyway, so I watched that halibut swam in. It went around that hook and then it moved close. And I was wondering, is it going to go up and bite it? And I kept watching, and it happened so fast I didn't even see it. I didn't see. All I knew was the halibut opened its mouth and the hook was in its mouth. And when it hooks in the side, the hook's in the mouth, the way it hooks. See, its mouth is this way, so the cheeks, and it hooks in somewhere in here, and it doesn't have a barb on it. So the muscle will tense up when that barb hooks in. And if you don't pull the hook up in time, you know, you got a while, but if you don't pull it up, the muscles will relax and that hook will fall out. So you don't drown the halibut. But when you start pulling it up, because the way the hook is in it, it turns the halibut on its back. And some of you may have seen on television, you take a shark and turn it on its back, it's just like it becomes unconscious. It's the same way with the halibut. When you turn it the white side up, it doesn't fight, so it's got to keep trying to turn the dark side up, but they keep pulling, and so it doesn't fight when it's coming up. So how did they figure that out? How did they figure out that hook? And then the hooks they made for black cod, they would take branches. It was either branches or part of them. But anyway, they'd take them about just a little thicker than my finger, and maybe about a foot long. And they would take a plum, or it's called plum, I think, a bull kelp, and cut off the section where the bulb is, and take all those sticks and poke them into that piece of kelp, and plug the one end, and then they put them in the ground and cover them with a little bit of sand, and then build fire over it. And when the fire burns down, they dig it out, and it steams that wood, and you take it out, it's just like cooked spaghetti, just that soft. And they had a jig like with pegs, and they would put that in there, and they would close it all the way around, so it was closed like this, the ends, and they would let it dry, and they would put oil on it, fish oil, so it didn't dry and crack. But then, when they use it to fish, they'd open it. It's go from here, and they open it and put a stick in there to keep it open. They put the bait on that, and they drop it down, and when the fish bite that stick, it would release the tension on that thing, and it would close and get the gills. So, you know, I guess it's sharp on the tip so that it would get the gills. And that's how they would catch them. So, this book by, what's his name, Hilary Stewart, I think it is, they have pictures in there of these things and how they made them out of those sticks that make them up. But the question becomes one of, like red snappers down there about 100 feet down. How do they know they're down there? How did they know where to look? My dad took me out on a boat, and I said, "Where are we going, Dad?" And he said, "We're going to go get some red snapper." And so we're going on, and they stopped the boat. Well, they put down the lines. You know, put the lines down, we started catching red snapper. And then we stopped catching them. He said, "Pull up your line." And he said, "We drifted off the bank." So we had to go back, put down the lines, and start catching them again. So when I went out, you know, just a 16-foot boat, went out. I don't know how I knew that's the spot, because there's no mark on the water. It's over a mile to land on either side. So there's no real landmarks. But you know where it is. It's something you can feel inside. So when you look at our ancestors, we have to really look at ourselves, and we're capable of almost anything. We can do anything if we would just let ourselves open our minds and think about it, rather than trying to learn the details of everything. Counting, I was asking Todd, but you know, sometimes you overthink a problem. Some people wanted to go horseback riding. There were 2 mothers and 3 daughters. How many horses did they need?
It depends. Maybe if they double, or they're all riding their own horse.
They're all riding their own horse.
Then you need 5, right? Two mothers and 3 daughters is 5 people.
Okay. One of the women was a grandmother. One was a mother and one was a daughter. So you have 2 mothers and 3 daughters. But see, that's why when they would ask questions, you try to visualize what they're asking you, because it seems like a trick. But the whole thing is to get you to think about something to where you don't have to ask questions. When you get to the point where you stop asking questions, it's because you're figuring it out yourself. I did that to Todd for about 3 years. And then one day I said, "You know, Todd, it's been about a year since you've asked me a question." Because he started figuring it out himself. So that's how it works. And then with our language, this Jimmy Dentz I was talking about, that showed my uncle how to bring that tree down off the mountain. My dad and 2 of his brothers, their uncle, the guy in Ginawan, needed an addition to the back side of his house to make a little shed on it. And so Jimmy Denso, Kanda was across the road. He came over and he said, "You folks got a piece of paper, pencil?" So all they had was a piece of cardboard. He said, "Here's how you folks do it." He drew it out on paper. So they built it right down the ground, and then when they pushed it up into place, it fit. He didn't measure anything. guy named Amos Williams. Amos Williams made a violin out of Sitka spruce. And he was playing it on his boat there in Ketchikan one rain from fishing. The guy came down and paid him $900 for it.
Wow. Awesome.
Come on in.
So
$5 late fee. Hoopla. But anyway,
sit down.
that Amos Williams, he had to put what's called a horseshoe. It's a way guard on the stern of the boat. And he was tied alongside my dad's boat. We were getting rigging for trolling. I was, I don't know, 10, 11 years old. And he told my dad he's going to go cut out a piece to fit over the stern. And he left. He come back, I don't know, a couple hours later or something. And he cut that thing out on a bandsaw and he fit it on. He didn't have to measure it. He just eyeballed it and did it. So it's paying attention to details in your language too. When you start asking about things, we don't have any fractions. Everything is a whole unit. So if you cut a pie into 4 pieces, you got 4 pies, not 1/4 of a pie.
How did you learn Xaat Kil? Is it from when you were little?
No.
Listening to the elders and your parents, or?
No, none of the elders. The elders were in the church. See, they were just the old ones.
Yeah.
The old ones, and what they were doing is they were teaching me our history. And they didn't speak. I mean, I was a little boy. I was only 3 years old when they started. But they didn't use, we'll say, full sentences. They used English, but they would give me concepts in there and describe what they were. And so I didn't ever really become fluent in speaking the language, but when they would speak, I could visualize everything they're talking about because I knew enough of that. But when it comes to the grammar, I have the same problems as everybody else. Because I was away from home from the time I left when I was 13 to go to school, and I didn't get back home until I was 25 when I got home from the military. But every time I went home, those old guys were waiting for me. Sit down, dear boy, I'm going to show you something. Prepare yourself. So I'd have to sit like this, put my head down, close my eyes, and clear my mind. And I visualize sort of like a thing full of water with silt settling. And when it settled, I'd say, I'm prepared. And they'd start talking. And it was so vivid, it's like I'd go inside them and experience what it was doing. Come on in. Oh, we were expecting you to bring your drum, is that it?
Yeah. Nice.
What's it gonna learn this time? Honky tonk man? You're a good job. I think I put that. Where did I put that?
They are nice.
Where were you?
I didn't make it that day. I wanted to be there and listen.
There'll be another chance to do it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I write notes for myself. Then I forget where I put them.
No.
See, our word for a drumstick, it's called sitang. Sitang. That's also a whip. Sidang. Because the motion you use, you're not beating on it, you're whipping it. So when you're beating it, so it's called you're whipping your drum.
Mm.
How do you say it?
It's Sidaang. Sidang. The W is wow. Yeah, Sidang. Sidang. Gujao Sidang. Why? That's what you call that. That becomes a drum whip.
Mm. Oh.
Yeah, I try not to have to use written stuff as much as I can stay away from it.
How come?
Partly because I think it gets in the way of just memorizing symbols. So if you hear it, like for example, one of the things I wanted to do again is to go through on Sinodam Haida. So Sinodam Ki'an. Sinodam Ki'an. You're asking, how are you called? Sinodam Ki'an. Sinodam Ki'an. Sinodam Ki'an. And then you say your name, Counselor Hinu Di Ki'an. That NG sound comes from the nose. Sinu Counselor Hinu Di Ki'an. So you can start first of all just identifying yourself with by your name, what you're called. Sinodam or Kelly Hinu Di Ki'an. Huh? I can't hear very well.
J. Hinu D. Kia'an.
Ki'an. Yeah. Ki'an. You tighten the muscles here. Ki'an. And then, but if you're saying yes, it's or sometimes they take a shortcut and say
So, like, because I said my English name, there's a way to say that this is my Xaat name.
Well,
you know what I mean, as
it
opposed
says,
to your Haida name.
Xaat Kil. Or Kil. That's just English language. But you don't even have to do that. They know what it is when you use your English name. Like Woodrow, Hinu Di Ki'an. I'm called Woodrow. Odaangas Hinu Di Ki'an. So, and then when you ask somebody what their name is, Sinodam Ki'an. And Gya'ang though, Gya'ang is a totem. See, when you put up a pole, it's called Gya'ang. It says your history is now standing straight up. But anyway, we want to go through that song again. Is that what taught? So he's saying a lot of people are really
Interested in it. Yeah. Lots of views.
You can be a rock star.
The one we sang last time?
Yeah. Oh, hey, 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 yeah, see that when we talk about songs too, we don't just, some people say, well, this was composed by or composed by whatever, and it's calling an entry song coming into the house song, but it also had earlier use or meaning. And so that's why I thought it was the Tlingit or Tlamas Hatai, the Tlingit people to the north from a place called Kutsnu. They're always fighting with Xaat the Haida people from Sakwan. Xaat was the original name of a village, a place where we lived before the ice, called, it was Sagwa Kwan Lamai. It was Lanai, it was more of a camp. But it means the end of the land, the north end of the land is what it really translates to. But those Tlingit people were always fighting, we're always fighting with each other. And so Haidas decide they're going to finish it. So they got ready. There's an island called Buskun. On a chart of maps, it's called Forster Island. And to get there, it's 8 miles out into the Gulf of Alaska. So the Tlingit people call it Deki, and that's what they call us, people from the far out islands. No, Deki Nu is the other one, it's even farther out. But this one, Forster Island, is what it's called on the map. And so they start a rumor that got around that Haidas were going to all move out there and put all women and kids and old people there, and then they're going to come back and pick a fight. And so they set a trap. There's a place called Jutsek. Today it's called Skugumchak, but Jutsek is where we were at the time of the flood, when the water came. And the very strong tide is what it means. And when the tide is going out, the waves get big. And that's where that song, there's a song, it's where the water is moving. And anyway, they were going to move on, they were going to go out there, and they would sing that song, Agakwana is the spirit of the ocean. So they're asking the spirit of the ocean to be merciful and keep the waves small so we can make a safe journey out to Buskun. So they started that rumor, and then they knew, they got word that the Tlingits were coming after them. They got everything they could, they're coming to fight. So as they were coming down through, today it's called Mirror's Passage. There's a place called Eagle Point on one side, on the north side, and so there were Haidas on that side and this side, and they were going to wait till they got committed into there, and then they would attack from both sides. But somehow those Tlingit canoes got past, and when they got out to Forster Island, there's some cliffs there that go on. I've never been up there myself, but it's over 100 feet. And what they did was they piled rocks up there, and they rendered the fat from a lot of sea lions, and they had them in containers. And these Tlingits were good fighters. Once they start, they didn't back down. And so they were trying to climb those rocks, and Haidas were throwing rocks down on them and shooting with arrows, and they poured that oil down and made it slippery. And they felled trees against the cliff, and they were still coming. And they said this little gully down there was filling up with bodies. And finally the leader from Haidas called. He said, if you want to go home, you can go home with honor. You've upheld yourselves. And so they decide to go home, the ones that are the survivors. So they left. And from up on a cliff they saw something flashing and out there on the ocean toward Big Islands. So they went out there, and there was one of these Tlingit men who was swimming for his life. He had earrings, they would flash, and that's how they caught him. And they considered him a coward, because instead of just leaving with the rest, he'd already decided to run. That was before the canoes left. And so when they passed him, on the canoes didn't stop pick him up either. So they just dropped him. And when they got home, they talked it over, because both sides experienced so many losses, and decided maybe we should talk. So a man, my Chana had the same name, Kun Kayang. Kun is the whale, and Kayang is when he makes a big splash when he comes into life, comes into the. So Kun Kayang went to talk to those people at Kutsnu, that if you want to stop fighting, you come down and talk to us. So there's a small island south of Heidelberg. It's called Dago's Island now. But anyway, that's where they met, and there's a sand spit when the tide is out. All the people were in the woods, so, and the men, all just the men, and they were talking. I don't know how long it went on, but finally they put something on the fire so it made big smoke. And when the smoke went up, they knew agreement had been reached. So all the people that were in the woods started to come out on that Sanskrit, they're singing. And the women who walk in ranks of chief, when they were dancing, they danced with their hands up here. They would do it this way. And the others danced with their hands here. And the men, it's like you're dancing on a moving canoe. You don't jump around. You keep the beat with your heels, and so you move. You anchor yourself from here too, so you don't fall down. So anyway, when they were dancing, there was one woman had a very powerful voice, and they could hear her voice echo across the channel when they're singing that. Ah, hey, 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 ah, ooh, 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 hey. And so when they came out, that's what they did. And then they said, after this was all over, they reached agreement. They went up to what's now the Kalak River, and they stretched a cedar bark rope across the river, and they burned it in the middle, signifying that the Tlingit people could fish on the north side of the river, but it still belonged to us. And the word went out too that anybody stopped fighting with their neighbors or among themselves, they can use this song to symbolize that they're no longer in conflict. So it was also a peace song. And for years, when the people would sing that song, there was one person that would sing that echo. When they were singing, she would echo what they were singing, but her voice was louder than the others. That's how they used to sing it. So then initially it was coming into the house. But before they would come into the house, somebody would come in yelling, Amia, Amia, Kasil Gamilgam, Kasil Gamilgam, Amia, Amia, something's happening, get ready. And then after the person went in, these people come in and got everybody's attention, then there was an announcement song that was sung from outside the house. Then when they finished that, then they would sing this one. So we'll just stick with the coming in.
So that's the entrance song. It's also our anthem.
No, it's just a coming in song.
I must have missed it. That one with the Haida Language Song.
Oh, that's different.
Anthem. That's different.
Yeah.
Got the mumbo jumbo.
You're all right. It's okay to not remember everything. So,
Very grateful to be here tonight. I was able to, me and my daughter, had the privilege to make in these beautiful drums. The facilitator was Savia. Is that his name? Savia? Yeah. So, and it's a great honor to make some drums. And I had the privilege to use it the other few nights ago at home. I sang about 6 songs to my son, Hudson. He's 7 months old, and he just loves hearing me singing my Haida songs. And, so we'll just sing the entrance song. Stand up. Just stand.
Hey
lawyers saying it's been fixed. It's all fixed. The way one of the reasons why people, we danced the way we did, it says that when Raven coaxed the first males out of that clamshell, the females came from the mussel shell. But that's their story. We're not supposed to tell it because we don't know it anyway. But anyway, it says when they came out and they, from being all, and they begin to stretch, they could feel their muscles straightening, and say their lungs filling with air, and the light was bright. They couldn't really see, and Raven started moving. So they started copying how Raven was moving. And that's why they started dancing, because that's the way Raven was moving. And they were just seeing the shadow until their eyes adjusted to the light. That's why they do that. And it says also, when you're a leader of a big family, it's like you're standing on a windy point. The wind and the waves are coming. You anchor yourself. It's very much like martial arts. You anchor yourself right here. So that when the wind or waves hit you, it won't knock you off your feet. A big wave comes, sometimes you push it aside, but you check to make sure everybody's there. Sometimes a big one comes and you let it roll over you. And so that's what you're doing. If somebody gets washed off, you can't go save them because you've got all the others to take care of. That's why you do that, because they would check to make sure everybody's safe. Push that big wave away. And so anyway, that's the way it was described to me.
So that's the men's competition. It sounds like what you're doing. Like
The men's competition dance actually I think came from Ottawa, around that area, because all the jumping and all that is different from this one here, where you're dancing really on your heels. And it's because when we're traveling and you're dancing on a moving canoe, you fall overboard, you jump around. Or sometimes there's two canoes traveling side by side and they've got planks across and people dancing on that plank between that. And so they're anchored this way, rather than jumping down. But also getting down low. And I don't know the whole history. I don't know the history of it because I've never seen it until I went to Masset. And I don't remember the first time I saw it. But anyway, that's what we were told about why we danced the way we did. And the women have a different explanation as to why, but they can be very expressive when they dance with their shoulders and they dance here. But then they will dance this way with the women of great calm and presence. So anyway, there's different ways. There's no real right way, I guess, or real wrong way. But tradition has those stories in there for us to learn about being men. When you're a leader, you got to stand out there and face it. When it comes, you don't just turn your back. Sometimes you have to let it roll over you. Sometimes you can push it aside, but you got to stay there. So a lot of the stories, even like the drum, when we were boys, there was this man, George Nix. George Nix was the first Native American that was an All-American football player. He was named All-American. And he told us, he said when I was a young man, he said, I was tough. I'd face any man, head on. And one day my uncle came and says, Chana wants to see you. So I went to see Chana and he was sitting there with his skuja, his drum. Sit down here, boy, I'm going to show you something. And he started whipping that drum. And he said, it's time you learn the difference between a tough guy and a strong man. And he did that again. And he says, remember now, the drum can make lots of noise, But without a song to give it life, that's all it is noise. And that's the difference between a tough guy and a strong man. You have your own song. When you have your own song, you can see the rhythm, we'll say the universe, of how to fit yourself into life. Rather than being an individual, like with residential school, he said, no, you gotta be an individual, you gotta have your own personal savior, you gotta have your own personal this, personal that, and you get isolated. Don't trust or cheat you, don't share, they'll end up with more than you. Don't help anybody, because the only way to talk look out for number one. And for God's sake, don't give back. You can never have too much. So that's what this done. And so now we're trying to reconcile ourselves. How do we reconciliation where we restore a relationship that used to be good back to being good again? That means we have to reconcile among ourselves as to how do we accept ourselves and accept each other. And one of the ways is to start looking at what was the traditional ways that they did these things without European reasoning, as you put it now, because they have descriptions of things that are different. They have, our stories don't have a moral to them. The story is the message. And you have to be careful, because the stories sometimes are designed to confuse you if they catch you not listening. And they'll always pull a good one on you too. I'll give you an example. My mother's father was Cherokee. And so my mother and my dad and my mother's dad, my younger sister and my brother went to Oklahoma in 1950 to visit my mother's family. And my grandfather spoke Cherokee, and so did his brother and some of the others. And it was a farm, and anyway, it's kind of cold. It was in late October, and there was a four-legged animal, like Ewoks, had big ears. So I asked, I said, Uncle, is that a mule? He said, yep. Used to have two. I said, where's the other one? He said, you see that field out there, that empty field? He said, last year, he said, I was growing popcorn out there. And last August, he said that popcorn was real high. It was real hot. That mule got out there in that field of popcorn. He said it was so hot, the popcorn started popping. And that fool mule stood there and froze to death, thought it was snowing. So they would do things like that. I mean, you're really hanging on every word, you know. And it was the same way at home. You know, those old guys would tell us stories. Like, kid, he was going to go take a look around. I knew he was looking for a seal. And he went up the head of the bay, and when he came back, I said, Kid, I said, did you catch one? He says, almost. I says, what do you mean, almost? He said, I was on that rock. It wasn't coming close. I called it. And pretty soon it kept getting closer and closer, finally, and you can't move, so I was sitting there waiting. Pretty soon its head come up. I was just gonna pull that trigger, and it looked up and saw me and went, I almost got him. He didn't want to say he missed the shot. When it went like this, you know, saw the gun. He said he didn't have the heart to pull the trigger. Another time too, he missed the deer. He said, I fire, every time I fired, that deer would go like that. So they would have fun with these stories. It wasn't all just serious, you know, serious as a heart attack. There was always fun. You never know what they're going to say to us. And I've told a story about this old man that caught us eating his smoked hooligans. And he called us in the house. He set us down. He said he's going to show us something. And he talked about these Japanese people that had this duck with Haida with Kala. Kala was, it's a merganser, it's a diving duck, looked like a bottle. In English we just call it a bottle duck. But they go out where they know where the fish is and they tie a string on that duck's neck. And it goes down and catch a fish, come up, they take it and put it in a bucket, goes gets another one. And he says, you know why they had that string on its neck? For us, so it didn't get away. He said, so it won't get away, and also it couldn't swallow that fish. So if I catch you boys eating my Wilkins again, I'm gonna tie a string on your neck. And then he gave us some cookies. But by doing it that way too, making it fun, we never forgot it. But he didn't bawl us out, make us feel guilty or anything. So, you got another song you want to sing?
That song, the victory song here we're talking about.
Is that the one? The one they call the Haida Language Song, our national anthem?
I'd like to learn it.
I want to learn that one too.
You gonna sing too?
Sure, I'll use a little one. How do you say little?
Or it depends on a small person, Chuju, yeah, something small over there.
Is it Skundi?
That's we're singing small sounds. Come on, Shanika, you gotta sing too.
It's gonna sing what they call our national anthem. Call it the victory song. One of the songs that they used when they won the protest back in '85, the Haida Island protest, and just want to honor them with because very grateful for all those elders and all the brothers and sisters that were there that were at the protest. Here's I guess I'll just call it the Haida Island song.